This is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and we're going over each of the temple covenants. There are 5 of them. We'll start with 1. This is the law of obedience. Now, it's changed over the course of time in the Mormon Church and was recently changed. And so we'll have to do a little summary of the history of the Mormon temple and their rituals. It's necessary that you understand that Joseph Smith came from a Freemason family. He knew of Freemasonry before the Book of Mormon. And most Mormons don't realize that. They say, oh yeah, 1842. Long before. He knew. That's when he was finally allowed to get a Freemasonic lodge formed in Nauvoo. But the reason why he didn't do it before is because of the 1826 anti-Mason movement. Well, 1827 technically, but the news was starting to put out the campaign propaganda about the disappearance of William Morgan and the suspected murders. And everybody seems to think they found bones, therefore it must be William Morgan, and total chaos reigned. Everybody was riled up by the news reports. So in 1827 is when it actually occurred. And so with the Kirtland Temple, there was no format that we Mormons have today. And Mormons don't understand this. And so they think that, oh, okay, everybody must be telling the truth that in 1842 Joseph conformed the temple to the Freemasons. No. Joseph Smith held the temple endowment separate from the temple, or the Freemasonic ritual, even though they were held in the temple, because the Grand Master of the Warsaw Lodge denied Brigham Young's and Heber C. Kimball's request to form an official lodge and get going on the building of what was now changed to a cultural hall. They could no longer call them temples anymore because of the anti-Masonic movement, the burning of all the Freemason temple lodges. And so, yeah, Joseph Smith starts a religion, not a Freemasonic organization, establishes priesthood, not a boys' club in a Freemasonic lodge, and is able to build what is openly called a temple to God, not a temple of Freemasonry. Catching on? I have to be brief, because we're talking about the law of obedience. And so Joseph Smith, in the designation of the temple endowment, it was just a covenant situation of faithfulness to God. We don't know exactly the ritual format that Joseph Smith had, but we know that he didn't have the creation and fall stories, and none of the Peter, James, and John stuff. All that was added by Brigham Young. And that was after Joseph Smith died. And so most of what we now know of in the temple was not a part of Joseph's temple. So there was no law of obedience. It was Brigham Young who created the five covenants. And when we get to the law of consecration, you'll see exactly why it was Brigham Young, and it wouldn't have been Joseph Smith. But the first one is separated. One is for women, one is for men, and now it's been changed, I guess, so that everybody, does it to God directly. As I've mentioned in the polygamy, in other videos, Brigham Young started polygamy, and one of his wives, and Mary Elizabeth Smith, wanted a divorce. She wanted out, and we can tell that Brigham Young, obviously he granted it, but he wasn't happy. He was furious, in fact. Why do we know this? Because of the law of obedience. The law of obedience was made after the divorce. And in the law of obedience under Brigham Young, women were to obey their husbands, or they were required to commit suicide. The whole, arm to the square, palm down, fingers straight forward with the thumb extended, and then you do a if you violate your temple covenants. So women were forced to obey their husband or commit suicide. Now, you might recall certain Middle Eastern countries that are murdering women who are not obeying their husbands. That's a little different than the Brigham Young's method. So instead of murdering women who leave their husband, Brigham Young said, no, you women must murder yourself. You must commit suicide if you violate your oath to your husband. And before 1990, the covenant was for women, you and each of you solemnly covenant and promise before God, angels, and these witnesses at this altar that you will each observe and keep the law of your husband and abide by his counsel in righteousness. After 91, and everybody talks about it as the revision in 1990, but the temple's open in 1991, that's when it starts. So even though it was done in 1990, it was practiced in 1991. It was changed to hearken unto the counsel of your husband as he hearkens unto the counsel of the Father. And now man, the husband, is removed from the equation with the new changes that Nelson started at the beginning of the year. So now there's no presider in the home, and that's the video I did about destroying the family unit, is because the temple under Brigham Young, and even in the Bible when it talks about the fall story, it's to establish the roles of husband and wife, because women, their bodies are designed to have children, and therefore what do men do? Well, the earth needs to be made into a garden, and animals need to be domesticated, because if everything is wild, it will destroy and murder man, and so it's necessary to tame the elements. And unfortunately, the Bible uses the word reign or rule over plants and animals. This has caused some confusion as a result. And it's domesticate and tame, because if you're able to tame corn, for example, or maize, as the Native American Indians called it, then the quality of the food is better rather than the wild state. For animals, lots of hunters prefer wild game to domesticated game. I guess that's a personal preference. I don't know, it all tastes like chicken to me. But yeah, but we're straying from the law of obedience, aren't we? And so the husband, the man, he just solemnly covenants before God, angels, and these witnesses that you'll obey and keep the law of God and keep his commandments. God. And now men and women covenant right before God, and thus no presider in the home. Thus the other video I did about, well, yeah, the video of destroying the family unit and doing away with the family proclamation. So it's a little bit strange that Nelson does away with the family proclamation, but then gives a family proclamation to the Pope. I don't think Nelson thought that through. When you make a change, there are consequences. Nelson's not thinking about it. So that, in a nutshell, is the law of obedience. And is that the way God intended? Because it's clearly the way Brigham Young intended. And then Nelson. Because Benson, he just changed the word. Hearken unto the counsel of your husband. He tried to soften it for women. And women still weren't fooled for the most part. And thus Nelson was forced to change it again. To say, all right, fine. You don't have to obey your husband anymore. But then who rules in the home? Nobody. You're not supposed to rule. Daddy, no, don't beat me. It's not supposed to be like that. You know, you're supposed to teach and train your kids how to be adults. You're supposed to teach them good behavior in society, not to be racist. You're not to teach your kids to hate other people and to steal and to lie and deceive. None of that is supposed to be taught to children, and yet that's what's happening in our families. And so, yes, I mean, if we throw it in the political realm, we only have two parties here in the United States, dominant parties. The other parties are worthless, but we have Republicans. Republicans claim family first. They claim that they want the family unit to be the foundation of the traditional family, of the backbone of the United States. But what they're saying is that they hate anybody who strays from this. And the strange thing is that they're hypocritical, because the people who are getting busted for sex trafficking, child rape, and all this stuff, it's Republicans. And that's like, what? You guys are the family values group. So what's going on? And so, yeah, they're not practicing what they preach. They're just doing it to appease their base. Because their base is evangelical Christian. And so, yeah, there's hatred of gays and the LGBT community, and so laws are made to stop abortions, because, you know, pro-life, you know, heaven forbid that if a woman got raped by a Republican, that she would be allowed to have an abortion, so that, you know, the whole thing can be put behind them. Because that's exactly what they want once they rape you. and, you know, get an abortion. I'm not going to take care of you and the baby. I've got a career. I've got a football scholarship. I'm going to be somebody. I can't let you prevent me from doing what I'm doing. And so, yeah, there's lots of problems with that. And BYU has been caught in the news lately for their scandals of victimizing victims of rape. And so what about Democrats? You know, Republicans are outraged now. Yeah, those Democrats. Well, yeah, Democrats want to keep the family from happening. They're all for LGBTQ, which means no sex, no procreation. And you know, it's all, you know, it's whatever the woman wants. If the woman wants to have a baby, she can have a baby and have sex with a man. But a woman needs to pursue a career. She needs to have a education. She needs to establish herself as a dominant, powerful woman in the United States. Family last is the Democrat motto. And so with Republicans, they hate humans and hate women. Democrats don't want to procreate the species, or perpetuate the species, I guess. And it's the elevation of woman over man, and a reversal of dominance. So that's the sad situation that we're living in. There is no concept of equality in the home. There is no concept of equality in our nation, so that the home can be a place of equality. And so religion was supposed to explain that to mankind through the fall story. But Brigham Young took it a step further because of Mary divorcing him. So that's it. We'll get to my laundry, and then I'll come back for part 2, the second covenant.